Oh, I'm so looking forward to getting this flight over with today. You know, I'm super anxious. Good thing I have my emotional support animal with me.
Sir, you know that's an elephant, right?
Sure is. You know, Jumbo here not only relaxes me, but he's my best friend. And he's pumped to get his complimentary peanuts. He gets very upset when he doesn't get his peanuts.
Do you live, eat, and sleep the hotel industry? Looking to brush up on your game? You've come to the right place. Welcome to No Vacancy, the hospitality industry's #1 podcast with your host, Glenn Hausman.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to the No Vacancy Podcast with me, Glenn Hausman. It is the early 2018, still January. We're having a lot of time. It's frigid here in the Northeast, but I'm having a great time bringing the show to you each and every single week. And I want to just say a couple of things before we really get started. If you haven't subscribed to our weekly newsletter, what are you doing? You're crazy. Text the word hotel to 66866. That's all you need to do. 66866. Just text the word hotel, and be sure to share this show with your family, your friends. Stop people on the street. Let them know they have to listen to this. And also to check out novacancynews.com. We got lots of great podcasts up there, lots of great videos, and all sorts of new things that you're going to love to be looking at, to hear, to experience, all to help you be better in the hospitality industry. I want to thank Duetto, because some of this show is brought to you by Duetto, the revenue strategy technology platform that thousands of hotels are using to make money and beat market growth rates. Check them out at getrevenueresults.com. That's getrevenueresults.com. Now listen, you need to check these guys out because we're at an interesting point where it's getting much, much harder now to keep pushing your rate up there. And they've got the strategies, the tactics, and the know-how to make sure you do it. And one more little bit of shameless self-promotion. Make sure you go to patreon.com/novacancy. Show me a little love. Come on. I'm doing a lot for you out here. Show me a little something. Plus, it'll make me feel good about myself. And you know, I have such a delicate ego that I need your help. And I'm really looking forward to being part of the California Lodging Investment Conference on March 8th. Be sure to check them out at cliconference.com and use code NOVACANCY to register. You'll get yourself a little bit of a discount, and they're going to like me a little bit over there. All right, I do have some more plugs to do, but I'm going to hold off on that for just a little bit because I'm very excited today. I have with me Mr. Gary Hernbroth. He's the founder and chief motivating officer of Training for Winners, and I'm a little jealous because he's up there in the Pacific Northwest in the Bay Area, and I'm stuck here on boring Long Island. Gary, how are you, sir?
Glenn, I'm fine, and it is. You're right. The high today is going to be 62. I don't want to rub that in.
Yeah, thanks. I really appreciate that. I got to tell you, Gary, you know, I don't recall so many crazy, freezing, cold days here in the Northeast all strung together. Now, of course, you guys may be hearing this a little after, and we might have go back to some of that global warming, and it might be 90 degrees in January by the time you hear this. But today, Gary, it is frigid. I'm not liking it.
Yeah, I used to, I grew up in Michigan, and I remember walking to school, and literally if a piece of skin was not covered, then it was frozen. And I remember trying to feel for my nose in first hour, and by second hour, I could finally feel my nose.
Oh, you poor thing. That sounds terrible. It's never been that bad about here. That bad here. Whew, I'm having trouble speaking today, Gary. All right, forget it. Let's get down to the nitty gritty. Let's get this show on the road. I want to hear all about training because, Gary, I find that I'm in the hotel business. I'm in hotels 100 nights a year. And while I think so many hotels are great, I'm having a hard time really remembering a lot of them as I start to stack on trip after trip after trip after trip. You know, so hotels fall a lot of times for me in that mushy middle. They're not incredibly memorable, and sometimes they're incredibly horrible. And I only remember the ones that are really, really super bad experiences or way off the charts amazing experiences, but most of the ones that I just completely forget about. I mean, I could be in a hotel, Gary, and a month later, you could tell me I stayed in that hotel, and I'll have no recollection of it at all. To me, that's the death knell out there. How do you see the current state of the hospitality experience when it comes to delivering great customer service?
Well, Glenn, I don't know if anybody's ever told you this before, but you sound pretty normal to me.
Yeah. No, nobody has ever told me that before. So thank you. I'm gonna get a transcript of this show and post those words on my door so my wife can see it every time.
Yes, note to the world: Glenn Hausman is a normal guy, because that's usually how people rate things. We remember things that are the high highs and the low lows, and that middle, where I like to say blandness abounds.
That's a great word for it.
Kind of gets forgotten. I once went to a seminar where it was of all things, and as dry as this can be, there was a presenter about statistics, and it was not related to the hospitality industry, but he began to talk about it, so my ears perked up. And he said, these in-room surveys and the surveys that people, the hotels want people to do, he says, there's only three kinds of people that will ever fill those things out. They're either paid off, pissed off, or they have absolutely nothing else to do.
That's a great way to feel. I feel like that's the same for people that take political polls.
Right, exactly. And I thought about it, and of course everybody laughed, but the more I thought about it, I said, he's right. There are a lot of wonderful hotel warriors out there that do their job every day, and it's not a lot of flash and dash, and there's, and that's what they're supposed to do. It's kind of like the umpire or a referee in a game. They say if you don't remember the umpire in a baseball game, then he did his job. Meaning he didn't have the call right. So the hotel business is much like that. However, there is so much room for improvement, and what I like to do is try to get hotels, resorts, hospitality organizations in general, convention centers, whatnot, to move that needle so that they can raise their scores and increase their customer retention. Because when blandness abounds, then you are just dealing pretty much on a price or location commodity.
Yeah.
And there's really no mitigating factors to bring you back and go, wow, I've got to have this again.
That's absolutely true. Now, when it comes to bland and totally uninteresting, that's how I like my my airline experience. I want a flight to be completely forgettable, right? Exactly. But not once I get to the hotel. Because if a flight's not completely forgettable, something really bad may have happened. But in a hotel, I don't want to have that fungible experience where I could have just been anywhere and had the same ho-hum service. So, what are some of the issues that you are thinking about on a day-to-day basis to make sure that guys like me are going to be able to connect better with a hotel property?
Well, I like to think of it as a Rubik's Cube to be figured out, and because every guest has their moments, and while some of the these hotel companies all seem to be tripping over each other to chase the latest technology. We always read in this industry, so and so's got this, and you don't need a key anymore to check into a room, and pretty soon somebody else is going to try robots. So you come down the desk and you won't talk to a person, you're going to talk to a robot. That was rolled out a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I saw that at the hotels in Japan where you can talk to someone that looks like a person or someone that looks like a dinosaur, which I think is hysterical.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And so it's kind of a Rubik's Cube to figure out what do the guests really want. And once they're in the hotel, Glenn, technology is great. I mean, that might get them in the hotel. There might be some little sexy little things that can be done with it. But however, I recently
Yeah, it's kind of like that cool hotel in Japan where you can either talk to a robot human or a robot dinosaur, which I think is really fun and clever in a way, but doesn't necessarily help create a better experience for me in the long run.
Well, it's the fascination with shiny things and bright things and loud things and all that. It's probably fun to have. I mean, it's kind of maybe a spice of life type of thing.
Right.
But when it gets right down to it, hotels that are constantly chasing, they're going after the latest this and that and all that. They really need to dial back and do what I like to call the basic blocking and tackling, the X's and O's of the business. What does the guest in 212 want from their stay? Mm-hmm. They've already agreed on the rate, so you can't say, well, when a guest gets to our hotel, I hear this all the time, they want this and that with the rate. I said, no, the rate has already been paid. What they want now is the value, mm-hmm. and they want the experience. And sometimes, as you say, they just don't want any screw-ups.
Right, so, and that's the whole thing there, Gary. And I like how you talked about a Rubik's Cube because it's kind of challenging to figure out what guests want, and not every guest is the same way. And going back to that robot thing for a minute, we don't want robots to interfere with good customer service, but there, I think, is a way for it to be done for customer service that the guest doesn't like. One of the things that I say in my recent speech that I do on the road all the time is I think it would be great to have a robot, deliver me that breakfast at 5:30, 6 in the morning so I can come to the door in a bathrobe and not be embarrassed, but I don't want it to take away from interpersonal connections when I'm in the lobby experience and want some good advice, for example.
Well, that's right. And we all know that when we stay in hotels, shift happens. And for your listeners out there is an F in that word, so it's shift happens.
Yeah.
Let me be clear with that.
Yeah, we'll have to tell the iTunes people so as to not say that this is a dirty show here.
Right. And I came up with a term years ago in my training, Glenn, that I call, when I grew up in, I mentioned I grew up in Detroit, and one of the shows I watched as a kid was Bozo the Clown. You remember Bozo the Clown?
Of course I do.
Yeah.
Oh God, why am I forgetting his name? The guy who did the weather before Al Roker on NBC. He was the first Bozo the Clown, right?
Right. Well, Bozo the Clown had the long red hair and spiky. So anyway, and he's a clown. So Bozo the Clown. So I just came out with this in one seminar, and people seemed to resonate with it. So I kept it going, and I developed what I call Bozo-isms. And these are the things that I talk to hotels about getting out of your own way. And what I mean by getting out of your own way is those Bozo-isms that employees say. Now, they don't intend to maybe say the wrong thing, but it just comes out weird, bad, whatever, and it leaves guests shaking their head or scratching their head going, did I just hear that? And can it be? I'll give you some examples.
Please.
I was at a hotel where they have the little general manager's reception down below, and that they happen to be doing a little bit of something on the grill, right, for the guests.
Nice.
And I recognized the guy who was at the grill because he had driven my van. This is one of those hotels that offers a van within 5 miles of the hotel or whatever, and that type of thing. And he was a very nice young man. So I said, "Oh, hey, how you doing?" "Oh, yeah." I think he even remembered my name, which is fantastic. And everything was going fine until he said, and this is where the Bozoism comes in.
Uh-oh.
I said, "Wow, you're like a jack of all trades here." He says, "Well, yes, sir, I do it all. I drive the shuttle, I unclog the toilets, and then I come out here and cook on the grill."
Bad ordering.
Exactly. And I don't know, Glenn, if anybody else would even give a second thought to what he said. But as a trainer and as a coach in the hospitality business, I immediately went into, oh boy, this is precious.
For sure, because you definitely don't want your experience to, sorry about this, go down the toilet.
Well, right, exactly. So I smiled and I said, well, I hope, and I kind of whispered to him, I says, well, I hope that you don't tell people that in that order, and he thought about it and then he went, oh my God, yes, things like that's not my job. Oh yeah, we hear that complaint a lot. I don't know. Right.
I mean, you're just telling the guest that we really don't care to help because if we know about this problem, we're just simply not fixing it.
Exactly. Yeah, we hear that complaint a lot. I went down to the hotel pantry by the front desk, and I wanted a snack or something. Right. And I have pictures to support it when I was talking to the group, but visualize in your mind, and I'd like your listeners to visualize in your mind, going down to the pantry, and most of the shelves were empty. There were about 2 bags of chips, a half full box of Slim Jims, and some Tylenol. That was their big hotel pantry.
Wow.
Well, if that isn't right, and this is a corporate-based hotel that had to run at least in the 80% during the week. They've got a lot of corporate travelers coming and going Monday through Friday. So there's a lot of volume. Things are moving. You'd think they figured out how to stock their pantry properly. So if it isn't bad enough already having the empty pantry, now we go to the front desk, I do, and I ask, so I make some kind of comment about, you're going to be restocking it. And now the Bozoism clicks in. So the empty pantry problem is now compounded with what the employee says, which is a total reflection on the general manager of that hotel and the hotel in general. And here's what he said. Well, nobody's been able to go to Target for a while.
Are you kidding me?
No, I'm not kidding. So apparently they stocked their pantry with items from Target. Okay, fine. There's no crime in that.
At least use Costco. It's better prices. And you get good volume.
Thank you. But that. But I'm not finished.
Go on.
No one's been able to go to Target for a while, and we only usually stock that once a month.
Once a month?
Yeah, and I just told you about the business level and the business mix of that hotel. It's not tucked away in some podunk place, on the top of a mountain. This is a busy hotel. I said, oh. And then I kind of said, oh, well, where's the Target? As if to say, well, how far away do you have to go to get a Target? He says, oh, it's across the street.
Wow.
And the person had no intention of making, any kind of bad comment, or they were just having a casual conversation with me, Glenn, because I was asking these questions. But in the series of 30 seconds, that young man told me everything I wanted to know on several levels, and this is where the training part comes in. Number one, why do we have the empty pantry in the first place? We've got an operations issue.
Right.
Number two, if we're going to get employees talking to guests, let's at least make sure, and I'm not telling anybody to lie, but do they have to know full disclosure that it's stocked with items from Target, they only stock it once a month, and by the way, it's across the street. So he told me that, number one, he's aware of the problem. He told me that the hotel is probably aware of the problem. Number two, they can't seem to get anybody over to Target because, for whatever reason, so they're not responsive. And the third one is they just don't care. So in 30 simple seconds of a little conversation, I was able to find out really what how much attention management was paying to their guests and their hotel. So again, with a sexy website, with promotions, with marketing, with technology about not having to have a room key and this and that, and all these wonderful things. What is the guest in 212 hearing your people say? What service are we getting? With the road warriors, so to speak, who just ask simple questions and are told things like this from the front desk. And again, I'm not saying that there was a nefarious reason for this person to tell me any of this, but it's like the guy out at the grill. He just happened to tell me what he does for a living, and it just came out wrong, but it leaves you with an impression.
Yeah, so I think that's an important lesson for us to learn and understand. If you're a hotel executive, you're a general manager, and you're in charge of making these young people who they're eager. It sounds like they want to make an interpersonal connection with the customers to make them happy. They're just approaching it in the wrong way.
Because many of the training programs don't go far enough and really deal with what actually happens on the front desk. They try to. I get so upset when I hear them say, "Gee, Gary, if we got any training, that's an if. It was so mechanical, and they made us memorize lists." Or here's a better one: they put us in a room and told us to go online and watch the slides, and then when we clicked the slides and we got our certificate, now we're considered trained. And that's. You and I both know, Glenn, that doesn't go far enough. It's a nice little beginning, but it doesn't go far enough. I really address in order for hotels to go from a transaction mentality to a sales and service mentality. I really focus on 5 key areas. The first one is think like an owner. Mm-hmm. Everybody must understand they're part of the big picture and be empowered to think and act as such. Okay, so are they able to make decisions? We hear the term empowerment thrown around a lot, but it's not really, in my opinion, in effect as often as it could be. Right. Number 2 is accountability. Everybody owns a piece of the accountability. And it really doesn't matter whose fault it was or, who left the mop out in the hallway that the guest tripped over. Let's just get it fixed. It's accountability, and let's fix it. Communication. You can't do anything in this world without effective communication. I could go on for, your next 35 shows and we still wouldn't scratch the surface, but communication between the different departments of the hotel. And don't let those departments build up silos. And I encounter this all the time. Front desk doesn't talk enough to housekeeping. Housekeeping doesn't talk enough to security. Security doesn't talk enough. You get the picture there.
Yeah, why do you think that happens?
I think people get wrapped up in their own jobs.
Makes sense. Mm-hmm.
I think the managers, the managers, I think the unsung heroes of the hospitality business really are the middle managers because they don't get a lot of formal training. It's kind of learn as you go. Oh, you were a great housekeeper, so let's make you a housekeeping supervisor. Well, now all of a sudden they have to not only do their job, but they've got to be responsible for watching 15 other people do their job, and now they're in a, quote, management position, and they don't really have any training. But because they were good at job skill A, the industry assumes that they can be good at job skill B, which is leading those people. And that's a fallacy. That's a fallacy. It's like promoting a salesperson who was great because they had the New York market, and the New York market was doing well, so they made all their sales numbers. Let's promote them to director of sales and just leave it at that. Well, because why? Because they were a great salesperson, they're going to be a great director?
Right.
So there's not that connection. So I try to come in there and help through those spots. The fourth one I have is collaboration. Everybody's got to pitch in, and that breaks down the silos. So that means if I can't leave my little cubby hole and help you, then we have a silo built up. And silos do 2 things. They keep things in, they keep things out. And if we have a silo, and you're in your thing and I'm in my thing, then let's not help each other out. I went into a hotel once to do some training, and I just happened to mention to the general manager, there's a lot of rain coming down recently, and so there was water pouring down at the porte-cochere in the front of the hotel. And he said, "Oh, you're kidding." He says, "I wonder how long that's been going on." So he went out and he talked to the valet guys, and they said, "Oh yeah, well we noticed that. Yeah, this was like 1:00 in the afternoon." So yeah, when we got here this morning, we noticed the rainwater was coming down.
And nobody said anything.
Nobody did. Nobody called engineering to get a bucket.
Right.
Nobody made the front office manager aware that they can. I mean, that's part of their territory.
That's a bizarre disconnect to me, Gary, because when you see something like that, it's like you have to willfully ignore the facts that are out there. Wow, now I sound like I'm talking about politics again. But it's a strange thing. You asked a
great question. It could be a lot of things. It could be a fact of I'm too busy, but I don't really buy that one. I kind of blow that one down. Mm-hmm. I don't care. So I have apathy. Mm-hmm. So that is another one. It's not my job.
Yep.
I might have to do a little extra work if I call this in because somebody might make me go get the bucket. And none of those are very good reasons. And so over time, those will rot a hotel's service core out. And when you start doing that, you'll start losing guests. And the last of my 5 on this transaction versus sales mentality is camaraderie. Dysfunctional teams are not teams. They're just individuals that work in the same workspace. And customers don't buy just one part of a hotel. They buy the entire thing, right? So food and beverage, housekeeping, security, front desk, the whole thing. And they don't understand when they can go to one department and get brilliant, wonderful response and terrific service, why they will go get in the elevator, go 2 floors down to a different department, and everything is opposite of that. There's a disconnect to the guest, and they go, you know what? There's probably a better hotel I can stay at next time, and that's probably where I'm going to go because this hotel can't seem to get its act together, or whatever the reason is.
Right. Yeah. That's interesting to me. This whole conversation I find is really interesting to me, especially what is it about employees that aren't willing to go out there and get those questions answered. One of the training issues that I see is, you touched on it earlier as a mention, and then went past it, was when they'll either give you an I don't know or that's not my department, and they just kind of shut down the conversation. To me, a lot of things can go wrong in a hotel, but that's one of the more offensive things to me. It's just people saying, hey, I don't really care enough about you as a customer to even bother.
The tone, you're right. You're absolutely right, and the tone needs to be set from the top. I think it's as I mentioned, a combination of things. But one of the things is, if our management doesn't care much, then why should I care much? Supposedly they're the ones that make the big bucks, right? You've heard that one.
Yeah.
They're the one that make the big bucks. So why should I care about it if they don't care about it? So the management, the upper management, has to set the tone and encourage middle management to encourage their people to get their hands dirty, leave their little cubby holes. And if somebody is drowning out there, if we have a teammate drowning, it's like a football team. If you're constantly getting beat up by the all-pro across the line from you, let's get that guy some help, and let's start double-teaming that all-pro. We might have a better chance, but if you stay where you are, then it's not, the play you're running isn't going to be successful. And as far as how that rolls out, please, this is not training, okay? You need to ask the guest how their stay was every time they check out. Okay, but why do we do that? All right? I've never been a fan of that. You know why? Because, Glenn, when I tell people what they really want to hear, which is a problem that I encountered in the stay, I get, okay, will we be leaving this on your credit card then?
Right. Yeah, that's absolutely right. And, quite frankly, a lot of times when I'm leaving, I want to leave, assuming I even check out. I'm totally a ghoster. I just always leave, But right. Assuming I do go to the front desk and they say, how was your stay? I'm just going to say, it was fine. And then leave.
Right, because you don't want to deal with it.
No, I don't want to deal with it because I'm not going to get the response I want. And quite frankly, it's just easier for me to go somewhere else next time.
Customers vote with their wallet, Glenn. Yep. They vote with their wallet. So if they don't spend money and come back, then they're voting with their wallet, and that's how they send a message. And they're not going to go back and fill out your little questionnaire that you alluded to earlier in the show.
No.
I stayed in a hotel once in Southern California, and it was very, very hot, and I'm not sure the air conditioning was working, but when we turned it on, it sounded like a 747 plane engine in the room. It was one of those heater units or air conditioner, whatever. So you had either two settings, hot box, sauna, or 747 jumbo jet engine noise.
That's right.
And so and I had work to do the next day. I actually was down there to do training for a Southern California corporation, and I had a lousy night of sleep. I had a lousy night of sleep.
Ugh.
So it was a one-nighter, so it wasn't like I was going to move or anything like that in the middle of the night. So the young lady, when I was checking out, she said, how was your stay? And I thought, okay, here's where we go, Glenn, with this. Do I put on my training hat, which I find really hard to take off? My wife's always saying to me, you always want to say something. I said, yes, because I want to help people. I generally want to help people and give them a shot to improve. Now, whether they listen to me or whether they do anything about it after I leave, I have no idea. But
Right.
at least I'm going to give them the shot.
Mm-hmm.
And people will ask me, well, what do you do for a living? Oh, I'm a trainer and a coach. Oh, yeah. Well, then it clicks. So I said to the young lady, I decided to tell her, and I told her what I just told you about the airplane engine. She got the little nod. Well, yes. Can we put this on your? Are we going to leave this on your credit card, Mr. Hernbroth?
Oh my goodness.
And now I don't know, Glenn. Here's my worry. I don't know if that young lady had the chops, or the care, or the concern, or the wisdom, or whatever you want to call it, to go back to the front office manager and say, I just had a guest check out of room 212. He told me this story.
Right.
And now I don't know, let's go along the steps. Does the front office person call up the housekeeping director and say, we've got a problem with the air conditioning unit in room 212? Do they let the rooms person know? Does it end up on a report that the GM can actually see? I don't know if all those steps were followed. If you had to ask me, I would say they weren't.
Right.
So you know what? They hope to put it off for the next guest in that room, whoever the poor schmuck was going into that room the next night after me, hoping, well, either this guest was overly sensitive, or they're a light sleeper, or we'll just hope that the next guest doesn't complain about it, and if we have to, well, we'll just move them. So we just push the problem aside. Now, I'm not saying that the entire hotel industry does these things. There's some wonderful, wonderful performers out there that really do. They go over, they'll move your room, they'll send you an amenity, they apologize, they'll comp your breakfast the next day. They really go overboard. I love those people. So I'm not saying the whole industry is like this, but obviously for the purposes of this show and your listeners, I'm pointing out that there is a lot of blandness out there where I think a lot of people do just not pass that on, or they don't care, or it's not our deal. So that worries me. That worries me a lot, because that means we've come to accept mediocrity or even less.
Right. And I think that the problem is going to become a lot bigger if we're not careful as an industry going forward. The hospitality industry has really been growing. We're adding so many new hotels because the demand warrants it. But that means we need a lot more people to work in and operate these properties, which theoretically means there's a smaller group of really high caliber people. So I would argue now more than ever, we need to be extremely focused on this training initiative to make sure that we are able to connect with customers in the right way, or else it's going to just be a black stain on the entire business altogether.
Well, Glenn, can I forward you this thought?
Yes.
I opened training for winners. I had 18 years in the hospitality industry, both in operations and sales and marketing, and then I hung out my own shingle in 1995. It wasn't soon after that where we had a big downturn in the mid-90s economically. And I will venture this, and again, this is anecdotal. I remember, I recall this. I can't cite the exact publication or whatnot, but I remember when we came out of that economic swoon and came way up again. The hotel industry was really humming again. There was a magazine in our industry that published the discourse, because profits were going up, ADR was going up, hotel revenues were going up, everything was going up, RevPAR, the whole thing. And yet, when the customers were asked, service was going down.
Right.
And I wondered about that, and I thought about that, and I knew the person at the magazine, and we actually ended up doing a little bit of an article as a follow-up, and I said, why is that? Why, when things are getting better, does service get worse, or at least the perception from guests? It gets worse. And so I kind of formulated in my own mind that there's two times when service can suffer. One is when things are really going well, and one is when things are really going poorly. And that might sound like an oxymoron to you.
Not at all.
but if you'll give me a 30 seconds to explain it, when business is going south, of course, the natural thing is, some hotel owners and whatever, they cut back on staffing, they do certain things, they close restaurants, they limit the hours, they limit the staffing. So what one or two people, or what 3 or 4 people had to do, 1 or 2 people are now doing. So that explains how service can go down. But why does it explain when business is going up, service would go down? Because I think that, number one, from an ownership level, the profits are looking good. We don't want to add any more labor to our bottom line because, we want to have the P&L shining, so we'll get by with the same number. So our business load has increased. Our traffic has increased, but our staffing hasn't increased to accommodate that because we want to keep our expenses low because we want to make hay while the sun shines and the profits are P&Ls in a glorious moment here. And so that is the other way that things result. Also, people get so busy taking care of the increased business that their core things that they used to do when it wasn't so busy, there's no time to do that anymore. So it's kind of an oxymoron that service usually slips when business is down, but it also can slip when business is up, which is kind of a strange thing when you think about it.
Yeah, it definitely is a strange thing and one to really think on. So I think as we kind of wind down this conversation, the big issue for general managers and those even outside the property level is to really start to think about how you can ensure that your entire team is doing everything they possibly can. And I would encourage everybody to reevaluate all of your methodology and maybe get some of those mystery shoppers in there to find out exactly what the challenges are that you have so you could get in there and fix it. I feel like a lot of times that the owners or general managers want to do the right thing, but they're just not aware of some of the issues that are there. And I think that we could pay a little more attention and focus on those issues.
Well, the truth about evaluations that you mentioned earlier is this, and I think it was the same conference that I attended where the fellow was talking about the hotel statistics. Mm-hmm. Only 4% of ticked off customers ever complained to the company, which means the old adage about, well, if we don't hear anything, there must not be anything going wrong.
Right.
Is not true. So only 4% of your unhappy customers will ever tell you about it. And one of them is Gary Hernbroth because he's got his training hat on, right? But what that does is it gives us a false sense of security. And so, and I've sat in meetings before, and I've listened to operations people go, well, the numbers aren't that bad. And all of a sudden, Glenn, that aren't that bad becomes the new high water mark for their success. Ugh. And they begin to accept not that bad being wonderful. So my admonition to the hotel GMs and owners, based on what you just said, is this: I don't care if business is good, bad, or somewhere in the middle. You should always be looking to challenge your status quo. Are we doing everything we could be doing? Can we do a little bit more? What can we change? What can we tweak? What can we eliminate? What can we add? But never be happy with the status quo because you don't know that just because the guest in 212 didn't tell you you're doing a wonderful job or a poor job, that they were all that thrilled or wowed with anything in their experience. And that's the big challenge. You've got to constantly be looking inward and challenging your status quo because the guests are changing, the times are changing, their needs, their wants, their expectations are changing, and you have to be able to handle that and be out in front of that versus always reacting. If you're always reacting, you're going to lose room nights by the bajillions to your competitors.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I think a phrase that I've been using all last year as I continue to build my this podcast that you're all listening to right now at novacancynews.com is I understand that I don't understand everything. So the phrase I always say is I don't know what I don't know. So you need to be curious all the time to figure out those things that you're blind to, that you have no clue is out there. And the more that you focus and understand that you don't know certain things and acknowledge that, I think the more those things will become clear, and then you're able to put in the solutions that you need in order, in this case in hospitality, to create better customer service, which will lift up everybody's attitude who works in the hotel and make you more profits in the end. Yes, Gary?
I love that. I don't know what it is I don't know. And that's a sign, Glenn, I'm not patronizing you, but I've used that term myself. That's a sign for me that somebody's actually smart.
Well, thank you.
Because they know, as wonderful as a guy you are, I'm not sure I want you pulling out my wisdom tooth or giving me a cap on a tooth, because you're a wonderful guy, but I'm not sure you're a good dentist.
Oh, I'm a great dentist, Gary. You should come you should come check it out.
I'm sure that you, but I'm sure you would say, Gary, I don't want to take that job. It could pay.
That's right.
You could pay me $20,000 to take your teeth out, and I'm not going to do it, because you know what it is you don't know. And I think that's a sign of a very smart person. And that's kind of where the training order comes in, is when an organization is willing to kind of strip itself clean of all those feelings they have of, we've got this figured out, and we're not getting many negative reviews, whatever. Let's admit we don't know what it is we don't know sometimes. Let's admit we need a retooling, a polishing, a reinvigoration or whatever, and let's shake up our status quo here a little bit. And honestly, if you were to ask me, Gary, what's your number one competition for people doing training, I will tell you, it's not any particular training course. It's not any particular training device or methodology that's my competition. But I'm sure I'm going to speak for a lot of trainers in a lot of other fields in this answer too. Our competition has two words: status quo.
Yeah, right. I was thinking apathy. People that just don't even bother to worry about it.
Apathy can come from status quo.
Excellent. All right. Now that you've sufficiently fed my ego, I'm feeling really good about myself. I feel like I could go and tackle the world. So I think this is a great place to finish this interview. Gary, I have to get you on here again sometime in the near future. But before we go, you got to do some shameless plugs. How can people find you? Give us another 30 seconds on what your business does.
Okay. I provide customized training and coaching sessions for hospitality organizations, whether it's convention bureaus, convention centers, hotels, resorts, big hotels, small hotels, suburban hotels, resorts, all that type of thing. It's customized, so I don't. There's no one size that fits all, and I really ascribe to that. They can reach me at Gary@trainingforwinners.com on the email. My website is trainingforwinners.com, so I like to keep it simple.
Yep.
If anybody listening here would like to connect to me, I'm also on Twitter, and I have a LinkedIn profile, so I will be glad to join up with anybody who's on your show, Glenn, because anybody who's listening to your show is good enough for me. I'd love to connect with them. And then I also have a Training for Winners Facebook page. So it's Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and the website trainingforwinners.com, and Gary@trainingforwinners.com.
Beautiful. I love a guy who knows how to give out a good plug. Very impressive. And before we go to commercial break, I want to thank everybody for listening, and be sure you join me at the annual AHOA Convention and Trade Show. Yes, the No Vacancy podcast is the official podcast of the AHOA Convention and Trade Show, March 27th through 30th. It's the largest hospitality convention and trade show in the world, and I'm going to be there capturing stories and advice from thousands of people that are living out that American dream every single day. I love this group of people. I think they are amazing. They are awesome. And I also want to thank Red Roof for sponsoring my podcast booth that's going to be there. Come check me out. I will be in that clear plexiglass booth with the big red roof on it. Gary, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Glenn, for having me, and best wishes for the new year to you and all of your listeners.
Yes, and we will be right back right after this message. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Have a question for your host, Glenn? Tweet him now at Traveling Glenn. No Vacancy, the hospitality industry's #1 podcast. We'll be right back.
From Eureka to San Diego and Malibu to Bakersfield, the California Lodging Investment Conference, CLIC, is one of a kind, focusing exclusively on our Golden States hotel market. CLIC was launched in 2016 by Craig Sullivan, a seasoned hospitality industry professional, to harness the knowledge of our industry leaders, support our community, and educate emerging talent. CLIC brings together lodging professionals from California and beyond for one day of learning, professional development, and networking. If you are an owner, operator, investor, broker, developer, lender, management company, brand, or professional services provider, you should plan on attending CLIC 2 on March 8th, 2018 at the Hilton Irvine Orange County Airport. We invite you to go check out the California Lodging Investment Conference website at cliconference.com for the latest details and sponsorship opportunities. Early registration now open. And as a listener of the No Vacancy with Glenn Hausman podcast, please make sure to use our exclusive discount code of No Vacancy when registering for this one-of-a-kind in California hospitality event that sold out in its very first year.
Back to the show. It's No Vacancy, the hospitality industry's #1 podcast with your host, Glenn Houseman.
All right, so everybody here, if you're listening to the show and you've listened to any episodes before, you know I'm passionate about eating. And I love cooking too, but I'm not really that good at it. So I'm always amazed and surprised by how terrific people can be when they're in the kitchen. But a lot of these folks, they don't just learn it on their own. They don't learn it in their kitchen at home like I'm trying to do. They go to great schools to learn how to do it. And one of those schools is Johnson & Wales. And I'm fortunate enough to be able to be speaking today with the Johnson & Wales University's Charlotte campus president, Tarun Malik, who's quickly become somebody I really respect and admire and love talking to. Tarun, how are you, sir?
I'm fine, Glenn. It's a real pleasure to chat with you.
Yeah, real pleasure to talk with you too. Well, first let me say how excited I am. I've already we've got this great relationship that we've started off, and you folks are able to provide the No Vacancy News Network with such great content, which is already started. So I want to thank you all for providing that.
Glenn, it's a privilege to be associated with you. I think the both entities share an absolute passion for food, and would love to see us sharing this passion with the world at large.
Yeah, it's really great because you have an expertise. Everyone, all of the folks in your organization have such an expertise that I can only hope to have. So what's really great, check out some of the podcasts that we're doing. We, as of recording of this, we've already put up one. There'll probably be a second one already put up by the time the show's released. It's a lot of fun. The first one focuses on the Latinization of Southern cuisine, focusing with demographic shifts and how that's affecting the food that we all know and love down there. And I love that we're getting insight into the history and understanding of how food is created and developed and morphs over time. So pretty cool stuff there, Tarun. I love that history aspect of the food.
It's absolutely brilliant. It gives us an opportunity to share our expertise beyond the kitchen.
Yes.
Everybody looks at a plate of food, right? It tastes great, it looks good, but there is so much culture involved and there's so much history, and it's a unique opportunity for us to bring that out.
Yes, and speaking of culture and food, we're taping this show right around the holiday season, and it has me thinking about culturally speaking. The last few podcasts I've been talking about how much Jews love Christmas and how much on Christmas Day I always go out for Chinese food because of our love for Christmas. And I was just reading an interesting article about the reason why that may have happened is that all of the stores were closed, and the two big cultures that seem to have been intermingling at the time in places like New York City were the Chinese and the Jewish folks. So they seem to have come together under this desire as well. Plus, neither of them use dairy in their cooking simultaneously. The Asians not at all. Jews want to keep kosher, at least religious Jews. So I like that there's that overlap, that they felt comfortable with going to a Chinese restaurant because they wouldn't have to worry about it, and helped adhere to some of the kosher restrictions that they have. So that's the kind of stuff that we're going to be learning through all of these series. So it's fun, it's interesting, it's different. But Tarun, I want to talk to you today about what's going on at college campuses when it comes to great food and teaching the next generation of superstar chefs.
So, Glenn, while we are making a lot of progress and expanding the curriculum to include interesting topics such as food, we're also seeing some challenges. Mm-hmm. Everybody enjoys eating, and there's this new sophistication we are seeing in the restaurant scene. And you and I are both aware of the popularity of the Food Network and the conversation about the food. But this passion and this desire and this love doesn't seem to translate into kids opting to pursue careers in hospitality and specifically food. Mm-hmm. And that's becoming an interesting challenge for us.
Why is this happening, do you think?
There are a couple of reasons. The industry is growing very rapidly. It's adding more jobs than it has ever added. By 2022, the estimate is that we'll be supporting about 328 million jobs. That's about a 40% increase since 2013.
Wow.
To keep it really simplified, we're talking about 1 in 9 jobs, Glenn. Mm-hmm. So we're also looking at, apart from, so there's a demand out there in the industry. But unfortunately, this demand in the industry is not translating into the supply side for kids to get excited about this. And it started with the millennials. We started seeing a little slide with that particular generation. And there was a lot written and talked about the millennials. that they were sheltered, they didn't have the right work ethic. People forgot about the fact that it was a very creative generation. These kids are creative. These kids are passionate. These kids wanted to get involved. So you're looking at a clash of two cultures, an industry which has been slow to change and react to the needs of students, or, and a very critical part of their supply chain, which is human capital. We are quick to respond to changes when it comes to our customers.
Right.
But we're very slow to make the changes when it comes to employees, or specifically in the area of human capital.
Interesting. All right, so this is fascinating. I want to drill down a little bit into it. But first, let me add a little color. According to the the American Hotel and Lodging Association, I was about to call them from their old name from like 10 years ago. That's how long I've been around. What Catherine Lugar, she's the CEO of that organization. When I was working with her recently at a event on stage, she said that there's currently 600,000 jobs open in the hospitality industry. I'm sure a lot of those are food related. So that adds a lot of context to what Tarun was saying. So let's talk a little bit about why you think this is happening and how we can solve this problem in order to make sure there's plenty of folks that are helpfully employed going forward in hospitality and food.
Well, one of the big reasons is, there's been a lot of talk about return on investment of a college degree. Mm-hmm. We institutions like Johnson & Wales and the Culinary Institute of America, fondly known as CIA, have been operating in a space for a very long period of time. And we perhaps have produced some of the finest chefs. Between the two of us, have produced some of the finest chefs in the world, and especially this country. Then we had the advent of the for-profit sector getting into culinary education. The folks who are looking to make a big buck rather than focusing on the quality of education.
Right.
So you had this syndrome of tuition going up dramatically, very poor quality or a questionable quality of education which is delivered to students, and the kids were not prepared. And as a result, and a lot of the kids were borrowing a ton of money to go to school. So that's one end of the spectrum. On the other end is the reality of the business. The reality of the business is that we're not renowned for being the most high-paying industry. It requires long hours, and career progression tends to be a little slower. You and I came through this in the time when we were working in the business. You had to pay your dues, right?
Right, absolutely.
You really had to pay your dues. You had to be an understudy. You had to suck it up. You had to do whatever it needed to take.
Yeah.
Folks don't have the patience anymore. So a lot of folks started writing about writing about the question of the value of a culinary degree. So if you were to Google culinary degrees, all right, it always shows up as one of the worst degrees to enroll in. Right. But people forget the fact that if you get a 4-year degree, all right, not just culinary, but get a management degree to partner with that, it becomes one of the more valuable degrees because you've also picked up the business acumen.
Right.
So it's not just about being a craftsman. It is also about being a well-prepared, well-rounded food service or hospitality professional.
Right, because it's an issue of, hey, if you go and you don't get that full degree, then basically you're just going to be working on the lines and subject to that hourly fee, as opposed to making it to management positions a little bit more swiftly and easily with a better type of degree. Is that what
right,
you're getting at?
Yeah. So sorry, Glenn. You could be the world's greatest line cook for the rest of your life.
Right.
Versus being, if you want to be a chef, you have to develop that managerial acumen. You have to really understand the financial element. You and I are both aware of the fact that the industry still has a very high mortality rate. The failure rate of restaurants is fairly high.
Right.
You have some very talented chefs, who put out a great product, but if they're lacking on the business side, that restaurant's not going to make a go of it.
Yeah, it's very true. And I see it a lot on, shows like Hotel Impossible, for example, or, Bar Rescue, where all of these people either buy hotels or buy bars or buy restaurants, and they have zero understanding of what it actually takes to run a business. And then they're surprised by the fact that they can operate it. And then when somebody comes in to help them, they don't seem to really be able to grasp the fact that maybe they weren't doing something wrong and should be open to learning and changing the way that they do things.
You're absolutely right. It's not just the glamour and glitz. There's a lot of hard work which supports that, and has to every it's a business proposition. It has to have a good underpinning of solid foundations.
Right. Yeah. Really, I'm sorry. Continue.
No, we're good.
Yeah. Okay. So that's interesting to me. So how do we go about making this change and making sure that, students don't get sucked into the glitz and glamour of seeing these celebrity chefs on red carpet events everywhere and being treated as if they were royalty, and get them to understand what they really need to do in order to find success in such a great and interesting business?
I think we need to do what we do with our customers. We're very good at listening to customers and making modifications and adapting things and making changes on the fly just to make sure we remain in business. If we just take a leaf out of our book and a practice which we have refined over the years and applied to the kids, we have never articulated the opportunity of this particular sector. Just think about it, Glenn. Mm-hmm. It's still perhaps one of the only industries where you can go from the dish room to the boardroom.
Right.
You can work your way up. If you have a good work ethic and you put in your time and you do things right, you can get there. And there are so many success stories out there. And we never articulate that. We don't share those success stories. It is still an avenue of opportunity and an industry of opportunity. And that needs to be highlighted. It's still an industry where, you can express your creativity. You can directly have an impact on making people happy, bringing pleasure to people. At the same time, even contributing to wellness. And it's a matter of changing the way we present ourselves.
So, so do you have ideas on how we could change the way that we present ourselves in order to make it more interesting to future students?
Absolutely. I think we really need to emphasize the opportunities for folks. And I had a similar kind of conversation with Catherine Luger 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. To drill down and say, look, why don't we have a concerted, organized effort to do so? Couple of other things we can do, Glenn, mm-hmm. is look at all the work we have done with farmers, all right, to make sure that we have a sustainable supply chain when it comes to ingredients. We really have to treat people as a very critical ingredient to a successful food service or a hospitality enterprise. So it starts by making an investment and educating kids who are in middle school about the opportunities which exist in this industry. Make it appealing. Accentuate the positives of the business. Not everybody is cut out to go to graduate school. Not everybody is academically inclined. This is a profession in which you can use your creative side, and you can refine your business acumen.
You are absolutely right about that, Tarun. And one of the things that I find most frustrating with society that we're seeing really express itself in today, the way that we work and that we live, is that in the 1970s, for some reason, we decided that the only valuable education was a college education. I mean, a 4-year traditional degree that leads you to a typical white-collar job, right? But there's a lot of people that don't necessarily want that or fit into that. And I wish we put more emphasis on using our hands for creativity much more in our society. And I'd love to see kind of a return to that. And I'm seeing more of that in the last couple of years, especially with guys like Mike Rowe, formerly of Dirty Jobs, getting out there and preaching about working with your hands and how important that is to our society. So if we could get the schools to start thinking about that a little bit better and bring back some of those programs, I think that then it'll open up a lot more opportunity for schools such as yours to even find more success bringing in the right type of people and having them stick within the industry over a longer period of time.
You're absolutely right. Can't argue with that point. It's a very, very valid, relevant point to make.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. I love being right. So could you do me a favor, though, after this? Email my wife and let her know that I am right sometimes. That would be really helpful to me.
That's a rather risky venture.
All right. Maybe I'm a little stepping over our bounds of our relationship at this point, but, I get it. You want to stay away from that rattlesnake pit. Okay. So moving on. Once folks graduate school and they get into the hospitality workplace, in the kitchens and stuff, I'm finding that one of the issues that I see, we've talked about this offline before, is that they're realizing that the disparity of working in the kitchen compared to working out front really turns off a lot of people, and it gets folks that might have been brilliant chefs but hadn't had the number of hours in the kitchen yet to perfect their skills, just give it up completely in order to be servers, which, while you can make better money, seems to be kind of a dead-end move if you're really a career-minded professional. How do you see that kind of a thing?
I think you need a balance. And it just depends on somebody's personality. I think it's very important for somebody who aspires to have a successful or a lucrative career in this business to understand both sides of the house. The philosophy we use here at Johnson Wales is, when we talk to the culinary kids, is we tell them the kitchen is the place where you spend the money. The front of the house is the place where you earn the money. Mm-hmm. You have to understand the relationship between the two. And we struggle. I mean, our challenge is a little different. We have kids who are very talented, and they would rather just toil away at the back and not have anything to do with the diner or anybody up front. So what we try and do is get them out to come and at least talk to their fellow students who are their customers for the day, so that they develop that particular skill set. I could be the most talented chef, but if I'm just going to hide in the kitchen and be happy with all my ingredients and keep messing about over there, mm-hmm. I'm going to limit my opportunities. So I am not, having worked the front of the house in a future lifetime, all right, and having worked in the kitchen as well, I can tell you I was more comfortable at the front of the house, even though there were days you had to deal with perhaps very difficult people, and we'd all like to forget about those particular episodes. And it wasn't for financial reasons. It was just because I think it has also a lot to do with one's personality.
That's interesting. That personality component in particular. I feel like some people are better suited for back of house jobs than front of house jobs. Not a swipe at certain people. It's just I think we're all programmed a little bit differently in the way that we interact with others. Some are just more front facing, and some are just more like, hey, let me stay in my own head and do my own thing in the background.
Sure. I mean, it's like public speaking, right? You're very good at it, and you can probably spin off something, without putting too much thought into it and sound very articulate and coherent. And there are others who probably have a 350-minute anxiety attack in order to sputter out as a coherent sentence. But, our responsibility is to make sure that we develop the whole person. So we spend a lot of time emphasizing the importance of public speaking, developing their personalities, which is another thing which a culinary school does or a hospitality program does. Because you have to be gregarious despite your, I consider myself to be an introvert. I'd rather spend time in my own company, and I'm very comfortable doing that. Mm-hmm. But when the lights come on, right, it's showtime.
Right.
And with showtime, then you can't hide in a corner. You have to take on a different persona altogether. Right. And that becomes the comfort level. And, we spend a lot of time trying to develop that and refining that in some of our students.
I think that's a really fascinating point that you put out, especially the point about an introvert, which some people would be very surprised that I am a raging introvert. I really just like to be left alone and not have to deal with anything. But just like you, when the lights come on, it's certainly showtime, and you got to put out all of your energy and be as focused and social as possible in order to make things work. And then, after you do that, then you need to go and hide in a corner and recuperate and kind of get over it. That's kind of how
and I would have never pegged you as an introvert.
Oh my God, Tarun, it's insane. If I do a big time speaking event, for example, I could speak with no problem in front of thousands of people. I get off stage, and as soon as the adrenaline rush wears off, I am 100% depleted, and I just want to go and take a nap. It's crazy. It's really bizarre.
Oh, I tell you, you brought me on to something which is a bit of a challenge for us, and we are working very hard to develop this. And going just back to the demographic of millennials and Generation Z. We all know that they are kind of, attached to this electronic umbilical cord of whatever device they are hanging on to. And they're very happy to engage socially with their friends and their circle, but struggle to have a coherent conversation with another human being. It's fascinating to talk to kids who are sitting right next to each other, and they don't know a thing about each other. So what we are trying to emphasize with this particular generation is the power of networking. And perhaps you and I are a little old school, but there is nothing more powerful than going up to another person, looking them in the eye, shaking hands, and having a conversation, which a lot of these kids absolutely struggle with. And you and I both know in this particular business, you're going to have to deal with human beings. I can't send my guest a text message. My guest is not going to place an order on Facebook or any other, social media device. It has to be a human interaction, even though that is becoming, less and less. You can easily sit in your room and order your food and somebody will come and deliver it, and the interaction is limited. But we are social creatures by habit and by genetic code. There's the reason why we go out. We try and engage with folks. You could be alone, but you're with people.
Yes.
Think about it. I mean, Starbucks is a classic example of this. Everybody's plugged into their own device, but you're in a public space.
Right. I've always called that being alone together.
So we're trying to, go back to basics and teach our student population networking skills which go beyond posting messages and, thumbs up and using emojis and all the new high-tech things which are in vogue these days.
Yes, and to take that a step further, besides the student thing, I think as a society, we're really shifting much, much more so to the point that gathering around that table for food and drink is really the main way in the future that we're all going to interact with each other in a social and experiential kind of way. As we live more and more virtual lives and we have less interaction with people, that craving, that desire to be with other individuals, I think is really drawing us to restaurants. And I think that's partially why we're seeing such an expansion in the food and beverage business, aside from the obvious fact that we're all much more time constrained in our business and we eat out a lot more because we don't have time to prepare those meals at home. But so I think that you've got to have those great skills. You've got to have good people skills. You've got to have those great networking skills. And if you're a back of house person, you've got to come out as that chef and, make sure that everybody's happy and learn from those people. And that interaction between the two folks, I think there's nothing better in order to make everybody happier, satisfied, and really expand your horizons as an individual to learn from each other. And I think we all become better is what I'm trying to say in a very long way when we're with each other.
And we're all craving for experiences. If you just think about it, dining is no longer this, while there is this inherent function of sustaining the body through nourishment to keep ourselves going, we're looking for that unique element. The unique element is, look at all the elements which contribute to the experience of dining. That adds an interesting adage. And a lot of it is being driven by the millennial generation because, they don't want to replicate what's in place. They're looking for something new and unique all the time. So they do have a lot of creativity to offer. It's up to folks like you and me and folks who are running, operating the businesses to tap into this expertise because they bring a very unique perspective.
So we can learn something from the millennial generation instead of just continuing to make fun of the millennial generation for being younger and better looking than us. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. I've been interacting with this generation now for about 10 years. I find them absolutely fascinating. I mean, they're like every generation, they are an enigma and people question their work ethic. I find these kids to be very intriguing. And I think the industry has a very promising future ahead of us as long as we make the necessary adjustments to make this industry a little more appealing and attractive to these people.
How do we make it appealing and attractive to millennials while also making sure that the baby boomers and that the Gen X folk that have established positions in the industry can stay in those positions and have the millennials work in the way that they're more accustomed to? I think what I'm trying to say is how do we bridge the gap between the older generation's work ethos and the younger generation ethos?
I think it requires managers and management companies and leaders to be flexible. You have to, just like you have an understanding of your consumer demographics, you have to have an understanding of your employee demographics. And so I might be kind of stuck in a record or, stuck in a warp over here, but I'm going to keep suggesting, you have to take the time to understand your employees. There's a difference. And it's not that the baby boomers had a better work ethic. They just had a different work ethic. They were willing to put in the long hours. They were a lot more patient. With millennials, one has to be flexible. You have to think about engaging them. It requires somebody to go have a conversation, listen to what they have to say. Just in talking to students, they understand that every idea they have, they don't expect these ideas to be implemented, but they want to be heard. They want to participate. They want, there's a desire to engage. We, on the other hand, we're so hierarchical in our thinking. We keep looking at organizational charts and say an idea can only come from somebody who either is a rank above me or at the same rank. Mm-hmm. Somebody who just joined us 3 days ago doesn't have the requisite expertise. And that, we have to bring about that mindset change. And you're going to find things very interesting because you're going to see about 3 or 4 generations working hand in hand and shoulder to shoulder in most businesses.
Right. Yeah, that makes an awful lot of sense to listen to everybody. It should go up and down the hierarchical chain because if you're missing out on what those younger people have to say, I think you're losing a big piece of the picture. Not to suggest that what they have to say is the gospel, but hey, even if they have 1 out of 10 ideas that are good or they're little kernels of an idea within it, I think it can inspire you as an older, more established professional to think a little bit differently. And I think it gets us older folks out of that spot of thinking that everything that we're doing is the way to do it. I think when you've been in business for a long time, you get set in your ways, and sometimes you need to get a symbolic slap to the head to wake up and hear different ideas and change in order to be more relevant in the future.
You're absolutely right. Look, we've all had to make those adjustments, right? Mm-hmm. I take a lot of pride in going around and talking to students, and there are kids who will come up to me and say, have you thought about doing this? And you can either take it as a personal affront, right? Or you can try and say, let me have a chat with all these kids, and perhaps there is a nugget here which could be used to better the place. And if you use them, things work out. We're seeing the same thing in the classroom. We've become a lot more creative. We've got, the chefs have adjusted to this particular generation in our beverage classes rather than somebody being the sage on the stage and just espousing whatever they learned a couple of years ago. It's to get the kids engaged and actually allow them, give them some control of the class and allow them to demonstrate their capability and their creativity.
Excellent. So you have any partnerships with hotel companies? So for example, when these young people get out of school, that you could send them to management groups, ownership groups, major hotel groups, those kinds of things?
Glenn, we partner with just about everybody, but perhaps Marriott stands out as one of our strongest partners. And the Compass Group, which is based here in Charlotte, North Carolina, it's a large institutional food service company. It's about a $24 billion enterprise. We've had a long-standing relationship with them. So whether it be farmers, whether it be the local craft breweries and the distilleries, or somebody who's just got a food truck, we work with just about everybody to make sure that we create the right opportunity for our students. And it's not uncommon to have 130, 140 employers on campus for career day. And, these kids are in an absolutely wonderful position. Going back to the statistic you cited not too long ago, there are so many open positions. This industry is craving for talent. Each kid walks off with about at least between 2 to 3 offers and have the pick of the litter. And, the right ones have a lot of choices.
Right.
I think it's a great time to be a student in the hospitality sector.
Right.
Perfect timing.
Yes, absolutely. I agree. And add a little more texture to that. Remember, we are shifting as a society from a place that manufactures things to a service economy. I know that the media and the politics of it would like us to say that we're going to be returning back to a manufacturing economy, but we're simply going to not. It's just not the way it's going to happen. People don't want to work that way anymore at all. So, and there's the hospitality experiencing is expanding. Just look at the way that how many new hotels are opening up on a yearly basis. That means each one of those properties need a group of people to work in them. At the same time, we're seeing, a steadiness or a decline in the manufacturing in this country. So it's a great growth industry. It's one to be a part of, and it's something that can offer you an exciting future. If you're a student and if you're an owner or a management company, I suggest getting in touch with Johnson & Wales and President Malik over here to learn how you can partner with them to get new folks in your organization. Tarun, how can people contact you and reach out to you and connect with you in order to, talk with them about anything in regards to what we've been discussing here today?
You can send me an email, tarun.malik@jwu.edu.
Easy enough. Any other thoughts and final words before we wrap up today?
this is an absolutely wonderful industry. And for the right student with the right attitude or the right demeanor, it offers endless possibilities. It's a global industry. You're always going to have employment. You are going to get so many unique experiences by just dealing with people. People are absolutely fascinating. And having worked in this business like you, Glenn, I don't know what my life would be like had I not experienced this particular industry.
Well, you certainly wouldn't eat and drink as well. That's for ssure.
Absolutely.
And I think that at the end of the day, that's really what's most important. Excellent. So I want to thank Tarun Malik for being here today. Be sure you check out Johnson & Wales University, and don't forget, check out all of our continuing coverage each and every week here on the No Vacancy podcast, and all of the special shows that are going to be coming at you in 2018 from Johnson & Wales. I'm excited to have them on board. I'm excited to have each and every one of you on board every single week supporting the show. So for Tarun and myself, I want to thank you all for listening, and I'll be back next week. That is, unless I decide to just drop it all and start working in a kitchen. Thanks for listening. I'll see you all next week.
Thanks so much for listening to No Vacancy, the hospitality industry's #1 podcast with your host, Glenn Hausman, online at rouse.media, on Twitter at Traveling Glenn, and on Facebook.com/Glenn.Hausman. We'll catch you next time.